So we're going to begin the technical session 2, leveraging AI in healthcare security, protecting data and strengthening resilience. The wonderful topic, the speaker is Dr. Chitij Chauhan, who's the Chief Information Security Officer of Foundation AI. He's a seasoned IT and cybersecurity leader over 20 years and global experience across sector, including SaaS, fintech, healthcare, and energy. He specializes in aligning technology with business goals and driving digital transformation across organizations. He is an expert in cloud security, AI governance, and regulatory compliance such as HIPAA, GDPR, and SOX. Known for leading large-scale ERP and infrastructure modernization initiative, Dr. Chauhan partners with C-level leaders to build secure, scalable, and resilient digital ecosystem. I now welcome Dr. Chitij Chauhan to take over.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Just give me a sec. Yep, and I hope everybody had a good lunch and you're not sleepy. Okay, I'll quickly start with a counter question before I jump to the topic. It's related to we have been talking about the use cases of AI and all its benefits. Has anybody had a chance to look at absolute disasters of AI? AI. Yeah, absolute disasters. Some of the worst case situations. Anyone? Traffic management, yes. I'll give you one prime example. Now, most of the airlines, as an example, I can correlate, I'll later on correlate to healthcare as well. Most of the airlines around the world are having, a chatbot or a virtual assistant, right? Air India has it. But if you check out for Air Canada, you will not find it. Air Canada has disabled its chatbot. The reason being is, about 2.5 years back, Jake Moffat, an individual who wanted to travel, he inquired with the chatbot and wanted to know if the airline is, his grandmother had passed. And he wanted to know if there is any kind of a policy for getting a discount for bereavement, right? And the chatbot said that you could book the tickets and take the, make a claim for refund within the 90-day timeline. He traveled from, he did one-way booking from Toronto to Vancouver and then back. And within that stipulated timeline, he, claimed the refund. And he was told by the airline that this is incorrect. Prior to purchasing the ticket, he should have inquired for this. Now, he took them to the tribunal, and the line of defense that the Air Canada brought about was that this is a separate entity. They tried to deflect that altogether. One of the tribunal members, Christopher Reeves, what he did was he put the onus on the airline itself, saying that this is your responsibility, you cannot debunk that. And eventually, the airline was, had to compensate to Jake the fair amount for, and as an outcome of that situation, what happened is Air Canada disabled its chatbot altogether. It's been close to 2.5, 3 years now, they still don't have it. So what I'm trying to highlight is that AI has its place, there are great areas, but when it comes to decision making, you have to balance it out. And that's why you need a human in the loop. It's similar to in my current role, we do document automation for healthcare clients and everything. But before we make a final decision, we have a human in the loop to verify that the final thing before it hits the customer. Yep. All right, let's quickly get started. So we are going to be covering about my topic is going to be more focused on generative AI use cases. So what's the aspect of generative AI within healthcare? Some real examples, case studies, use cases, and what are the future trends and implications. So let's talk about introduction to generative AI within healthcare. Now, first of all, what is the importance of healthcare security? Now, a country like US has a countrywide law on HIPAA, but we still don't have something like this in India. And one of the, even in countries where you do not have a healthcare law, if as a part of your data retention, the healthcare data for a particular patient is retained for a very long time. If you go to a place like South Africa, it is kept to, close to 20 years of history, patient history has been maintained. So that just itself shows you the importance of the data retention, because obviously you're tracking the patient history, you're trying to figure out, the overall analogy related to that. So it is very important to safeguard sensitive data. And then maintaining patient trust. Today, in this part of the world, because there are no such laws around healthcare compliance, so if somebody is having a disease or somebody is having something, you go to a private clinic and there is a possibility that, your data has been leaked to a third party, and the third party is trying to reach out to you, obviously as a part of their promotions, trying to upsell some kind of a medicine or some kind of a product. And then regulatory compliance. So there are stiff regulations in certain places around the globe where there are severe penalties related to it. So HIPAA is one prime example. So the bottom line is that the healthcare security is paramount. Just like some other sectors like banking sector, this is of vital importance. So having enough safeguards, to deal with PHI, protected health information, is very vital. Now, what is the current landscape related to, healthcare security? Now, if you look at the overall industry trends, healthcare, similar to the federal sector and other sectors, it is one of the prime targets of cyber, criminals. Because they are prime targets, if anybody is able to get healthcare data for a large hospital, they can go to the dark web and upsell that. So they are prime targets. So there is a surge in the, if you go back in time, a decade back, the surge in cyber attacks targeting hospitals has increased by an exponential amount. And one of the challenges with healthcare systems is that they are also dealing with legacy and fragmented infrastructures. You also have a lot of IoT devices, within the healthcare system. Think about your X-ray machines. Think about some similar other kind of medical equipment. So they are designed for functionality, but they are not necessarily designed for security. And when you try to connect the dots, you have a system wherein you have some elements of security well designed, but because of legacy infrastructure and because of IoT, proliferation of IoT devices, the challenge is that how do I combine, how do I deal with the risks, information security risks within the healthcare segment? So at one end, you have cyber, you are quite visible because you are a healthcare organization. Now, many of you would know that within the last 2 or 3 years, AIIMS was under a lot of duress. How many of you remember that the fact that AIIMS, one of the premier healthcare organizations in India, was under a cyber attack? Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. And the point is, were they able to recover fully? And you would like to take this. Was AIIMS able to recover fully from the cyber attack they faced? they faced significant roadblocks for days and days. And I would say at least for good 2 or 3 months, their systems went into a backlog. So they were not able to sustain pace with that. So think about this. Your premier health organization in the country is targeted by cyber attacks, and you may be having backups, you may be having everything, but you cannot secure, they haven't secured every elements of that healthcare infrastructure. So it becomes paramount that the healthcare is one of the critical infrastructure sectors. It's one of the backbones of one of the backbone sectors of a company. Just like how you would have an aviation sector or a banking sector, this is equally important. And right now, this is under a lot of pressure. In India, we definitely need a law to tackle, some of privacy-related laws or tightening of laws, because today, your data, you go to a private clinic, your information could just be leaked out. There is no control there. Now, one of the good aspects within the healthcare sector is that HIPAA, in US came in first time in 1996. So it has made significant strides to improve, the security of, the electronic health records. Now, why generative AI is a game changer, and more specifically for healthcare sector. So the ability to create synthetic data for secure training environments, that's very important. One of the big challenges is during the time of COVID, a lot of healthcare organizations, as a part of their routine testing, they were collecting samples. Now the problem is, if you're collecting samples of individuals, that's very sensitive data. Now you need to share it with other entities as a part of your partnership. So how are you going to be sharing that? You cannot just share the healthcare data, just like that, of certain sensitive attributes. So by creating synthetic data and by de-identifying the data, by de-identifying the record of an individual there, they were able to share the data with their peers. So for example, think about the partnership between AstraZeneca and obviously the entity in India owned by Mr. Poonawalla in Pune. They had this partnership and they were able to get this here, right? So that's the outcome. And then the other aspect is enhancing anomaly detection through learned patterns. So if there is some kind of anomaly, you want to spot unusual patterns, it is very helpful. So AI can definitely be a game changer there. And lastly, supporting real-time threat response using AI-generated defensive strategies. That's very important. So today, when you look at defensive security, it's very hard. You may be having a SOC team, but it is beyond the realm of humans to deal with sophisticated attacks. And when you're having thousands and thousands of servers, you have a limited resource pool. You could be having a 50 or 100 SOC team member, but at the end of the day, you need a way to identify anomaly within the system. It is not necessarily going to be pattern based. It could be based on heuristics. It could be based on some other factors. So that's where AI can come in. If there is some kind of a deviation from the routine pattern, that's where AI can come in and give you visibility that hey, there is something happening and you need to take action. Now, how can generative AI enhance cyber resilience? Where it could be used to enhance it, let's talk about that. AI simulates attack scenarios for preparedness training. So a lot of times companies, they go through incident response exercises. Just to make it easy, in a lot of organizations, you have, fire drills. As a part of your safety drills, you are doing testing. Similarly, you are testing, you have your you have red teaming exercises where you're testing out for ransomware response kind of a situation. How equipped a particular organization is to deal with some sophisticated, threats, right? So that's where AI can create multiple attack vectors and you can use those simulation exercises to enhance your capability. Now, where it can really help here is the fact that some of the use cases which humans would have not thought about, right? AI can actually stimulate some of those use cases based on the data it has. It can help you to, just give me a sec. Sorry. Yeah, it can help you to auto-generate contingency workflows for addressing security incidents within healthcare and thereby minimizing downtime and protecting critical systems. So as an example, when the AIMS cyber attack took place, one of the flaws within their system was it was not resilient. And if that's the challenge faced by the top healthcare institution in the country, then that speaks volumes about the fact that the healthcare sector is in doldrums right now. And a lot needs to be done to improve the cyber resilience of the healthcare sector. A lot of issues could be pertaining from the fact that patient data could just be leaked anywhere. You have a DPDP Act, which has come in right now, but healthcare sector has been abused for a very long time. It's just taken for granted. And also, it can help you to, generative AI can also aid in zero trust architecture enforcement by verifying user identities, right? And device access. Now, one of the big challenges within the healthcare sector is, as I mentioned, you have a lot of IoT devices and how they are connected. It is very easy to sabotage your IoT devices which are used. And we have a de facto trust in these systems. I mean, if you were to go to a healthcare facility, would you be thinking about the fact that when you're undergoing an MRI scan or an X-ray scan, would you assume that this machine which is performing the testing is sabotaged? No, because we have de facto trust in that. What if it is sabotaged? What if that MRI scan, the X-ray scan is not actually yours? If that is sabotaged. So, one of the things that really get missed out is within the healthcare sector, you have a lot of IoT sensors. And that's an area that needs to be addressed. And that's where generative AI can help you by looking at patterns, by looking at some anomalies. Now, some of the real world examples of generative AI in healthcare. Post that, we will expand this notion to cover the security-related use cases. Generating clinical documentation. Now, you have an example of Nuance Dragon Ambience Experience by Microsoft. What is the use case? It automatically generates clinical notes by listening to doctor-patient conversations. So in a way, it is, alleviating the stress related to, handouts and all those kind of things. Doctors can just be focused on, looking at the patient, talking to the patient, because many times what happens is, if you are having a conversation with the patient, at a later stage, you may want to, it may be a good idea to trace back. Now, if someone visits the doctor, the only kind of conversation that has happened is during the course of the appointment. But post that, even doctors are humans. They may miss out on something. What if at that particular point in time, something didn't strike them and they want to go back to they want to have that interaction with the patient? Sometimes it could be days as well. So that's where, if you have some kind of a written history, it makes it easy. Tracing becomes easier. So here, they're using generative AI to transcribe and summarize spoken interactions into structured clinical documentation. So that's one use case of it. The other one, which is very important, and rather in this presentation you will see more often, it is creating synthetic medical data. Because a lot of these, when you are, as I gave the example of the COVID research that happened at that time, a lot of companies, they share their data, right? They're sharing those data as a part of the clinical trials. Now, if you're exchanging confidential information about an individual. If you're able to look at a particular record and you're able to identify a particular individual, that's where the problem is. As long as you're able to de-identify the individual part from it, then it makes that job a lot easier. That's where synthetic data, can help you to create synthetic patient data sets that mimic real world data without exposing PHI. See, in some instances, de-identification can help, but in some situations, if you have a data sovereignty requirements, where you cannot leave the data outside of the country or outside of a particular state. In those situations, de-identifying the data is also, some of those tech-related techniques to bypass, the regulatory landscape will also not work. That's where this nomenclature can come in and help. So you can use generative models like generative adversarial networks or variational autoencoders to create realistic patient records. So this can, by doing this, what's the use case? It can enable data sharing and research while complying with HIPAA, and not just the data privacy requirements, but also the data sovereignty requirements. The big challenge is if the law of the land says that the data cannot leave the land, then I think then it becomes difficult. Generally, there are techniques like encryption, just rearranging the data in a way where you are removing that identification part of from a record and then sharing data. Those things work, but if the regulation says that data cannot just leave in any form, then it becomes a challenge. And this is where creating synthetic medical data can help overcome those challenges. Now, real world case studies of generative AI in healthcare security. You have MD Clone. It's one of the companies whose product is being used very widely around the globe. What it does is it provides synthetic data environments for secure analytic collaboration between hospitals and external partners. And synthetic data sets are generated from real electronic health records using privacy preserving techniques to prevent re-identification. So that just tells you the collaborative power of AI, which is helping, because in the field of healthcare, data exchange is a paramount thing. That's how you can bring awareness. And I'm talking about between research facilities. Security functionality here, enabling sharing with security analysts and external vendors for penetration testing, compliance checks, or audit simulations. And you minimize insider threat by removing real patient identifiers. So if once you remove the real patient identifiers, then this problem is completely minimized. And some of the customer examples, you have Mayo Clinic and the Sheva Medical Center, who use MD Clone for privacy preserving research and secure operational reviews. You also have Scenario. This is one of the companies that it's a cybersecurity company, and the use case here is it has multiple products, and one of the products help to integrate generative AI into the cybersecurity platform to fortify the protection of healthcare facilities against cyber threats. And how generative AI is used here. Now, I talked about the fact that IoT devices are a big problem in the healthcare sector. They enable you to classify the devices, and by classifying the devices, you are having some kind of metadata related to those devices, and you're also having the pattern-based interaction. So you are also exchanging data with those kind of IoT systems. In the event if they are compromised, you can use generative AI to trigger a notification saying that this particular system is compromised. That's where it can help you. So it can give you visibility beyond generally what's usually covered. And by also using scenario, you can identify anomalies and potential threats within hospital networks. And once again, I've already stressed on the fact that the Internet of Medical Devices, they are a big case of concern because they are never been designed for security. It's only for functionality. And that's why this solution, scenario solution, is helping many healthcare organizations around the world. By integrating this platform, they are getting visibility into which IoT devices possibly could be compromised or where there could be some kind of takeovers. And this can, what is the overall impact of this? Operational efficiency and enhancing patient safety. So if you are able to mitigate and identify cyber threats in real time, you're able to solve that problem to a large extent. And then another solution, which is now MITRE is a well-known agency in US. It's known for its MITRE adversarial tactics, and they combined with Microsoft Healthcare for, basically to not just to take the notion further for your preparedness, to create adaptive phishing emails and fake patient communications for security training simulations. So here in this case, the LLMs were trained on healthcare communication styles to generate context-aware phishing simulations. Example, fake lab result notifications or COVID test request. So that by undergoing these kind of phishing exercises, simulations, it helps to spread awareness within your workforce. If there is some kind of a problematic situation, you're able to uncover quickly. Think about something like this. You're sending an email, one of the members of the healthcare companies is sending an email to their staff members, assuming that this is the correct lab report, whereas it may be a fake lab report, Today, with the help of some tools, it's possible to do email impersonation. Let's say if you have incorrect SPF record, then I can assume the identity of an individual using some third-party email client tools and send an email to somebody else. Whereas the recipient would be the impression that this email came from a registered source, from the trusted source. And this situation is slightly different from phishing. So the idea here is we want to spread awareness within the workforce to be able to identify threats. And that's the reason why you can use synthetic phishing and social engineering simulations exercises to increase the level of awareness within your workforce. Now, going back to the example of AIMS, do you think that the attack that took place, was it triggered instantly, or was meticulous preparation done, meticulous planning and preparation done to launch that cyber attack on the AIMS infrastructure? Anyone would like to answer that?
I mean to say, in other words, simple words, they don't have knowledge. First thing, they did not even expect that they will going to attack.
True.
And second time, they must have been learned. I don't know how much they have learned with the one first attack.
So it's talking about a situation where they were not prepared for the first attack, and the attacker, knowing that now they are aware that an attack took place, further tried to cement his legacy by launching a new wave of cyber attack.
And at least they know, I don't know how much they have learned, at least know onwards.
Further crippling the remaining part of the infrastructure. The situation was so bad that up to 3 months there was absolute chaos within the AIMS setup. I don't know how many people are here from Delhi, but anyone who went to AIMS around that time, you would have seen that, or even if you have read reports, you would definitely come to know. It's because they don't expect to be targeted. There was a significant amount of loss, you know. I mean, putting that in numbers will be tough because obviously that's more internal. But if you, patients who had appointments, you know, during the time of duress, they were delayed by 3 months. So if something like that is happening in the premier institution, then it's a sign of, you know, worry. So that's if, and it's also, you know, the other aspect is, could insider threat have been a situation there? Possibly. If you are able to sabotage the complete infrastructure out of it, there may be an element of some kind of insider threat. So they may have taken some advantage there. So the idea here is, if you are able to train your workforce, that's the first perimeter of your defense. That will get broken, you know, over time. But you have to keep rerunning these exercises, and you can run these exercises with the help of AI-created simulations to make your task easy. Now, what is the overall result? MITRE's pilot, they ran a pilot project with the US-based hospital, and that saw 28% improvement in detection of malicious messages after generative AI-based training. So that speaks for the fact that it led to better efficiency and a better way to figure out cyber attacks if there is any kind of a trace. Use cases. Now, there are different use cases. I think we already talked about synthetic data generation, where you can train models without compromising PHI. In many instances, PHI, you may not be, because of regulatory landscape, you may not even be able to, you know, apply any kind of technology criteria there. But if it is not allowed by law to leave the data outside of land, you cannot in that case. So synthetic data generation can help there. How about AI-powered threat hunting? Uncovering sophisticated, evolving attack vectors. A classic example of that would be, you have a SIM, you have a running SOC, you have a 50-member team, you know, out of which you have 20, 25 people who are dedicated to the SOC. But the challenge is, you have within your infrastructure, you are having a malware attack, and when you start tracing it, it's a fileless extension. It's a file with no extension. Now, today, in many platforms, if you go to many platforms, they will ask you to upload a file. You're identifying the type of a file by its extension, PDF, Word, JPEG. But what about a fileless attack vector, where there is no extension? That's why something like AI-powered threat hunting can come in and uncover sophisticated attack vectors. Many times, you have a malware which is polymorphic in nature, which will change its form every time it runs. So you could have, let's say you have a trace of a malware, and you have figured out what its signature is. During 24 hours, if it triggers 10 times, you have 10 different signatures. That's where most of your systems will not be able to trace this particular area here. They will not be able to identify this malware because it's polymorphic. And that's where AI-powered threat hunting can come in to look at other characteristics beyond what we define as rules in our security tools to figure some anomaly out and identify it, report it, and block it. The next part is secure documentation and NLP. You can scan clinical note for security risks. And then you also have AI-generated playbooks for automated response frameworks for quick actions, for mitigating any security incidents. That's where it can help you. And then there are other things like automated threat simulation, compliance monitoring, threat detection, data masking, de-identification. Finally, what are the future trends? Your data protection, as regulatory landscape, continues to become more stringent, you will have more challenges in this area. You will enhance, in the future, the threat detection capabilities using AI will further be enhanced. And this will eventually transform the healthcare security to bring overall trust and safety into the medical data management. Yes, there would be some of these constraints as well. How do you manage hallucinations, AI bias in clinical security? Ensuring traceability and explainability of AI actions, and maintaining compliance with regulations. So those are some of the things that, as a part of technology, evolution, we'll continue to deal with that. I think all the speakers prior to me spoke about this, so that's something that we just have to deal with it. And that's pretty much sums up the generative AI use cases within healthcare and how